We know Devontae Adams is going to be productive. We know how damn good A.J. Brown is. But at the end of the day, when you get to a point of your NFL career that it doesn't really matter how many fantasy points you score this season, your dynasty value is not going to rise in the next offseason. At that point, I'm willing to say, you know what? Maybe you're not necessarily a cornerstone asset. Maybe you're not necessarily someone that I'm fine rostering on a rebuilding or a contending team. Because if A.J. Brown goes out there this next year, right, and he is the wide receiver 3 from a points per game perspective, do you expect A.J. Brown to be worth the same or more next offseason? In my mind, he's going to be worth the same. He is not going to be able to accrue dynasty value. So I am not going to include him as a cornerstone dynasty asset in that I think he is more so a contending piece. So instead, I'm going to be looking at 24-year-old wide receivers or younger. Those are going to be guys that I think you can roster whether you're going to be rebuilding or whether you're going to be contending. These are guys that are going to be on every single team advantageous. Now, of course, I'd still rather have A.J. Brown over Jerry Jeudy in Dynasty, but this is specifically Cornerstone rankings. If you want to get all our Dynasty rankings, you can, of course, find those on flockfantasy.com. Over there on flockfantasy.com, what we did is we went over to my wide receiver rankings and put this slider down to 24 years old or younger, but you are able to access all of them, plus get 30% off any subscription when you use promo code FLOCK. And with promo code FLOCK, yours truly will go through and break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team with a podcast. But I think that should be it. Of course, drop a like, subscribe if you play Dynasty, and let's dive into this. Let's go over to Tier 1, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Now, I don't want to spend too much time here just because who the hell's going to argue with me, right? Am I going to have to try to change someone's mind? Oh, no, trust me, guys. Justin Jefferson's very good. Oh, no, trust me, guys. Jamar Chase, very good. Everybody knows these are the top two guys. There's really nobody that's going to be arguing this. Now, if I was to go through and try to talk on these players, I do think it's interesting in what we'll see with Justin Jefferson this next season. It's impossible to have Jefferson any lower than 1, but if we're going to be honest here, this will be the most target competition Justin Jefferson has ever seen. You're getting both Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson fully implemented into this offense in 2024. And with these two new weapons, I would make the argument that Justin Jefferson will have more target competition than any time of his NFL career, possibly just as much as what he saw back at LSU. Now, if you are going to be looking at Jefferson, it may not matter because even if the targets go down slightly, if Addison, Hawkinson are able to take some defensive attention away from Jefferson, even if we see a slight dip in target share for Jefferson, the overall efficiency may actually rise, and this may be a neutral move for Justin. So it's interesting. There's not too much to discuss. Really, it'd just be nitpicking Jefferson or Chase 1 and 2. Now, if you wanted to have Chase at 1 ahead of Justin Jefferson, at this point, with both TJ Hawkinson as well as Jordan Addison over there in Minnesota, I'd be fine if you wanted to have Jamar Chase ahead of him because, of course, Jamar Chase still has top competition, right? He's still going up against T. Higgins, but at least in the case of Jamar Chase, you have the long-term job security of the quarterback there with Joe Burrow, where in the case of Jefferson, we really don't know what to assume of Kirk Cousins in 2024 and 2025. Regardless, both these players are tier 1 assets. They are, in my mind, the most valuable assets in Dynasty outside of a handful of quarterbacks in Superflex. So if you look at my one quarterback Dynasty rankings on flockfantasy.com, you'll see we have Jefferson and Chase, obviously 1 and 2. Now, going over to 3, I'm going to have CeeDee Lamb in his own tier. Now, I've seen a lot of people kind of debating with this, and I've seen a lot of people wanting to go through and put Garrett Wilson either above Lamb or right in line with CeeDee Lamb. I don't really understand it, regardless of if it's, say, a best ball underdog league just for 2023, or regardless of if it's going to be a dynasty format. Because if we're looking at CeeDee Lamb, this is a wide receiver that this past season, at 23 years old, almost post 1,400 receiving yards at 23. Now, of course, you're getting a massive quarterback upgrade for Garrett Wilson. And for whatever reason, like I said, people in underdog drafts for 2023, not even Dynasty, are considering to take Garrett Wilson ahead of CeeDee Lamb at the moment. I personally am not doing it in redraft. I'm not doing it in Dynasty. Aaron Rodgers is going to be obviously a much larger question mark than Dak Prescott when you get to 2024, 2025. And with Lamb, we've already seen the elite production. He's incredibly young. What else could you really ask for? We will have Garrett Wilson at 4, though. But like I said, I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson a tier under CeeDee Lamb, where I know a lot of people are trying to move him above. And with Wilson, incredible rookie season. Like, it's hard to argue against it. And at the same time, you arguably get the largest quarterback upgrade in the entire NFL, going from Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers. But it's just, we've already seen it from Lamb, right? Garrett Wilson as a rookie did post 1,100 receiving yards, which is incredible. And you should be very excited about him. And yes, he's a top 4 option for us. Now, I do think he's in the same tier of Amon-Ra St. Brown, however. Because if you're going to St. Brown, another extremely young option, and with St. Brown, another hyper-productive player this past season. If it wasn't for the injury that you had from Amon-Ra St. Brown about a month into the season, Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of looked like he was on pace to go out there and put up a Cooper Kupp level season. I mean, right at the very beginning of the year. This is a player that averaged almost 10 targets a game this past season. He was a little over 9. This is a wide receiver that was at 72 receiving yards per game. Y'all know I'm not a big Jameson Williams guy, right? Like, I think Jameson Williams can be a good real life player. I don't think Jameson Williams is going to command a lot of targets from a fantasy football perspective. So I don't think Jameson negatively impacts Amon-Ra St. Brown. But yeah, going back to what we were talking about, you're looking at these players in underdog drafts. So just for 2023, being drafted as late round 1, early round 2 options. I've seen some people on underdog just for 2023 take Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown over Austin Eckler, over Jonathan Taylor. So people are all in on these wide receivers. I'm probably a little bit more hesitant than that. I still love the long-term outlook for these guys. I don't necessarily think that they're the same level of production that you're going to get from like a Devontae Adams, though, this next season. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I'm going to have Jalen Waddle down here. Now, y'all know Waddle's my guy, right? I mean, last year, my most drafted wide receiver on underdog. But if you're looking at Waddle from a dynasty perspective, like, Waddle's actually going to turn 25 this next season. Waddle's a little bit older than you'd assume. Keep in mind, he stayed 4 seasons at Alabama. So, wide receiver that had to play alongside Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, John Mechie. Like, Alabama wide receiver room is just freaking crazy. So, he's a little bit older than what you're going to see from these other options. But this past season, the man, very similar to CeeDee Lamb, almost had 1,400 receiving yards. Now, the difference is, of course, you still have Tyreek Hill in Miami. We can assume Tyreek Hill is going to be there for the next 2 to 3 seasons. I love Waddle. I mean, I love our next guy in Chris Olave as well. Now, if you're looking at expectations for just 2023 and not long-term, you are getting a teardrop for 2023 expectations from Waddle to Chris Olave if you're looking at where they're going currently in underdog drafts. However, given the fact this is Dynasty and you have Olave only going into year 2, Olave turning 23 this season, personally, I think you have to have Olave this high. I mean, if you are looking at Chris Olave and how damn good he was his rookie season, it is obnoxious. Keep in mind, this is a wide receiver that literally played with Andy Dalton through the majority of the year. And if we're going to go through and look at wide receivers since the year 2010 that were able to post 69 receiving yards per game, that were able to have a 20% team target share in year 1, and also play at minimum 8 games. Here's the list. Chris Olave, obviously. Then Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones, and AJ Green. Yes, it's the who's who of wide receiver. He did it with Andy Dalton. I'm not a big Derek Carr guy, but I am willing to say Derek Carr is much better than Chris Olave. It looked like his natural trajectory was to be a wide receiver 1, regardless of who the quarterback was there in New Orleans this next season. Knowing that he also gets a quarterback upgrade, I am extremely excited about Chris Olave. I mean, I've been drafting him a ton on underdog. I've been drafting him a ton in our dynasty leagues. You'll know we were already drafting him a ton in rookie drafts last season. But real quick, if you want to get in a fantasy football draft today, Underdog just launched Best Ball Mania. I'm sure 99% of y'all are already drafting there. $25 buy-in, $15 million prize pool best ball drafts. I'm going to be drafting like 700 teams on Underdog this offseason on the live stream. If you want to draft with us, you can find the link in the description. Use promo code FLOCK and you're going to get a 100% deposit match. On top of that, if you're a member of both flockfantasy.com and Underdog Fantasy, we are going to be getting you some exclusive merch very soon and extra credit in your Underdog account. Now, similar to Jalen Waddle, another wide receiver that's the number 2 in his offense, and I don't care. We're going to be looking at T. Higgins here. With T. Higgins is the wide receiver that I'm going to have a tier below Waddle, just given the fact if you are looking at Waddle versus Higgins, the difference is we could see at one point Jalen Waddle being the wide receiver 1 over Tyreek Hill. Like, are we going to be that surprised if Waddle's the wide receiver 1 in 2023 or if Waddle's the wide receiver 1 in 2024 in Miami? Nope. I think, honestly, by the time you get to 2024, it's probably the expectation. However, if you're looking at T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, on the other hand, where you have Jamar Chase actually as not only a better option in Cincinnati today, but also a younger option, you don't necessarily have that same natural career trajectory lining up. So I'm going to have Higgins down here. Still love Higgins, though. Now, Smith, this is a wide receiver, yes, that is incredibly exciting. We do have to be realistic. Very similar to Jalen Waddle, is a wide receiver that is a little bit older than you would naturally assume, but very similar to Jalen Waddle. There is a reason for that. He had to stay all 4 years at Alabama because it was one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football history. But with Smith this past season, he gets up to almost 1,200 receiving yards on a per game basis. Definitely not in the same tier as Jalen Waddle. I think a lot of people view Devonta Smith a little bit differently and maybe are a little too excited given the fact that, yes, he has that extremely hot stretch both at the end of the regular season as well as through the NFL playoffs. But you have to remember, you had Dallas Goedert missing a large chunk of games during that stretch. And in my mind, that kind of skewed what you had from Smith this past year. And very similar to Waddle, like we said, the man's turning 25, so he's not even going to be able to be on this list for too long. Now, going over to our next guy, we will have Jackson Smith-Njigba up here. I want to move him higher, ladies and gentlemen. I truly do. Like we were talking about all offseason, a truly generational wide receiver prospect. If you look at his score in our wide receiver model, he is only alongside elite producers at the position. The range of outcomes is ridiculous. I view him pretty much as bust-proof as a wide receiver is going to be. Now, of course, inherently, it's a little bit harder to evaluate and find values versus bust at the wide receiver position than it will be with rookie running backs, but still incredibly excited about both the floor and ceiling combo. What I'm a little nervous about with what you have with Jackson Smith-Njigba is actually going to be the situation where you have Metcalf there, obviously. Not only do you have Metcalf, you have Lockett for year 1. And most importantly, I'm just not a super big believer in what we have specifically with Geno Smith and the quarterback play that we'll have in Seattle for the long term. But if you were a bigger believer in Geno Smith, I'd be fine if you wanted to move JSN over Devonta Smith. Now, going down to our next tier, we are going to have Drake London. Now, with Drake London, an incredible wide receiver prospect as well. So if you look at where he scored in our model, he's up there with guys like T. Higgins. Incredibly excited about him. Now, if we are going to be poking some holes here with Drake London, the man is just in the worst situation you could ever look at. With Drake London, he went out there and had the #1 market share from a per game perspective that we have seen in a long time. Now, the issue is the Atlanta Falcons do not want to throw the ball. The Atlanta Falcons want to lead the NFL in rush attempts, and it doesn't matter how damn good of a talent that he is. It doesn't matter how good of a talent Kyle Pitts is. Right now, the situation is so damn bad that even if we believe the talent may be up there equivalent to Devonta Smith, for instance, you just can't have him in the same tier just because of this situation. Now, going down to our next tier, we are going to be looking at Christian Watson at 11. With Christian Watson, a wide receiver that I'm going to be drafting a ton of this next season. I'm not going to lie to you, I was a little bit nervous at first. Like whenever we were looking at Christian Watson's rookie year, I was like, okay, well, yes, a wide receiver that flashes elite level talent. I loved him as a prospect. We have a lot of them in Dynasty, but there are tiny little flashes that remind me of Chase Claypool. A wide receiver that wins with insane touchdown efficiency his rookie season, and that's what made him elite in fantasy. We know touchdown efficiency is extremely volatile from a year-to-year perspective, and that made me a little nervous. However, after looking a little bit deeper into it and looking at the yards per route run that you had from Christian Watson as a rookie, where he was number 6th in the NFL, only behind elite level wide receivers, in my mind, that is the number one indicator that shows this isn't a Chase Claypool situation. We don't need to be worried. Yes, the touchdowns are going to come down slightly, but there's an elite talent profile that's underlying this, and he's going to be able to make up with it by more volume this next year. So I'm excited about Christian Watson. Obviously, it's difficult to know exactly what we're going to have with Jordan Love. For that reason, I'm going to have Christian Watson down here just because I don't know if we should buy into Jordan Love yet. Now, going over to 12, I'm going to have Quentin Johnston. I'm a big-time Johnston believer. We'll have Addison here as well. I mean, with these wide receivers, I'm going to be very brief because we've talked about them over and over and over again. They check the boxes we look for. They break out as freshmen. They dominate as sophomores. And they declare as juniors. Those are the big three. And then once we get confirmation that they are round 1 NFL draft picks, they check everything. Okay. Now, of course, you'll still find some bust with this profile. Every once in a while, you'll have a Corey Coleman that looks like this, right? Every once in a while, you'll have someone that checked these boxes, but at the end of the day, they don't work out at the NFL level, and it's very difficult to predict that. But at the same time, these are the same boxes that you're looking at from a lot of guys that don't bust, from a lot of guys that are massive hits, such as a Mike Evans, for example. These are very strong prospect profiles. I am willing to go through and bet on these players. I'm going to take Johnston ahead of Addison because, one, I like the situation more in the long term, even if Addison has a better situation in the short term. And two, Johnston doesn't have the size concern that Addison does, which will knock Addison down just a little for me. Now, going down to our last guy in this tier, I will throw Jerry Jeudy a bone and have Jerry Jeudy here, who had a phenomenal back half of 2022. Don't scream at me that I'm too low on Jerry Jeudy. You know, I was the guy last year that was taking all the heat in the world for saying that Courtland Sutton was the most overrated player in fantasy and that Jerry Jeudy was the true number 1 option in this offense. It's true. I hope you listened. He's the number 1 option in this offense. But while I'm quickly willing to say that and flex on y'all that we've known that all along, I will also admit that the situation may get a little bit worse here for Jerry Jeudy with the target competition this next season. The overall offense may be better with Sean Payton, but Courtland Sutton will be healthy. Tim Patrick will be healthy. KJ Hamler will be healthy. And they draft Marvin Mims in the 2nd round. Javonte Williams will be healthy at some point. This was an offense that was decimated with injuries this past year. So now that you add in a little more depth, I think we have to be a little bit reluctant to say Judy's going to continue the dominance that he had at the end of this past season. He's still a great option, right? He's still someone we should be excited about in general. But I want to pump the brakes, and I am completely fine having Watson, Johnston, Addison slightly ahead of him. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, go down there and let me know in the comment section. If you want to get our rankings, you can also find that link to flockfantasy.com in the comment section. On flockfantasy.com, sign up with promo code FLOCK. That way you get that 30% off, as well as yours truly breaking down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team, either on a live stream or a personal podcast, whatever you prefer. But thank you again. Really appreciate you and really hope you have a great day.